A millionaire falls to the ground, gasping for air, on the verge of death. No one helps, until a poor 7-year-old girl approaches and shouts, "Calm down, I'm a doctor." Everyone laughs, but seconds later, she does the impossible and changes 2 lives forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The December morning in downtown Chicago was bitter cold, the kind that cuts through your expensive coat like it's made of paper. Michael Richardson adjusted his silk tie one last time before stepping out of his black Mercedes onto Michigan Avenue. At 40, he was everything America dreams of becoming, CEO of Richardson Tech Solutions, worth over $50 million, with a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. But success, he'd learned the hard way, couldn't fill the hollow space where his heart used to be. "Mr. Richardson, the board meeting is in 20 minutes, his assistant Sarah called from the passenger seat. Michael waved her off, already walking toward the gleaming glass tower that housed his empire. His mind was elsewhere, as it often was these days, trapped in memories of Jennifer's laugh echoing through empty rooms. 3 years since the cancer took her, and still every morning felt like waking up in someone else's life. The pain started as a dull ache behind his sternum, like indigestion from the stress of another corporate merger. Michael paused at the corner of Michigan and Wacker, pressing his hand against his chest. The morning rush hour flowed around him. Business people clutching coffee cups, their breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. Then it hit him like a sledgehammer. The crushing weight exploded across his chest, radiating down his left arm with the force of a freight train. Michael gasped, stumbling backward against a lamppost. His vision blurred, the world tilting sideways as if God himself had grabbed Chicago and given it a violent shake. "Help!" he whispered, but the word came out as barely a breath. His legs gave way, and he collapsed onto the frozen sidewalk, his $1,000 suit no protection against the merciless concrete. Around him, the city kept moving. A few people glanced down, their faces showing that particular urban mixture of concern and self-preservation. Someone pulled out a phone, but in the chaos of the moment, nobody seemed to know what to do. "Call 911!" a woman shouted. "Does anyone know CPR?" another voice called out. Michael's world was shrinking to a pinpoint of consciousness. Through the growing darkness, he could hear fragments of conversation, feel the vibration of footsteps on the sidewalk, but it all seemed to be happening to someone else, somewhere far away. That's when he heard it. A small, clear voice, cutting through the panic like a bell. "Calma, I'm a doctor." The voice belonged to a child, high and confident in a way that made absolutely no sense. Through his fading vision, Michael saw a small figure pushing through the crowd of adults, dragging what looked like a cardboard box filled with candy bars. "Move, please, let me through." The voice was getting closer, more urgent. "I can help him." "Sweetheart, you need to step back," an older man said gently. "This is a grown-up emergency." "I am a doctor," the child insisted, and there was something in that tiny voice, a desperate authority that made even the skeptical adults pause. "Please, trust me. He's having a heart attack and we don't have much time." Michael felt small hands on his wrist, checking for a pulse with a precision that seemed impossible. Those same small hands began positioning his head, checking his airway with movements that spoke of real knowledge, not childhood pretend. "His pulse is weak but steady," the child's voice announced to the crowd. "I need everyone to step back and give him space to breathe. Someone call 911 and tell them we have a male, approximately 40 years old, experiencing what appears to be myocardial infarction." Even through his haze, Michael recognized the medical terminology. This was no ordinary child playing dress-up. As consciousness slipped away from him like water through his fingers, The last thing Michael Richardson saw was a pair of dark brown eyes staring down at him with the intensity of someone far older than their years, eyes that held both profound sadness and unwavering determination. "Stay with me, sir," the small voice whispered. "I won't let you die. Not today." 7-year-old Isabella Martinez had been selling candy on the streets of Chicago for 8 months now, ever since her grandmother Rosa could no longer work double shifts at the cleaning company. But today was different. Today, she wasn't just Isabella the candy girl. She was Dr. Isabella Martinez, just like Mama had always dreamed she would be. "Sir, can you hear me?" Isabella knelt beside Michael, her small hands surprisingly steady as she checked his carotid pulse. The crowd around them had grown silent, watching this impossible scene unfold. A child, barely tall enough to reach most adults' waists, was taking charge of a medical emergency with the confidence of a seasoned physician. Michael's lips were turning blue, his breathing shallow and labored. Isabella had seen this before, in the medical textbooks her mother had left behind, in the YouTube videos she watched at the public library when she should have been playing with other kids. "I need someone to time this," Isabella announced, beginning chest compressions with surprising force. Her technique was flawless, hands positioned exactly over the sternum, elbows locked, compressing at least 2 inches deep. "Count out loud 30 compressions, then I'll give rescue breaths." "Honey, where did you learn this?" asked Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who ran the nearby flower shop and had watched Isabella sell candy every day. "My mama taught me," Isabella replied without breaking rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. She said doctors never give up, never stop fighting for life. 15, 16, 17. The crowd began to murmur among themselves. Some pulled out phones to record, others called family members to tell them about the miracle they were witnessing. But Isabella heard none of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man beneath her hands and the steady rhythm of life-saving compressions. 28, 29, 30. Isabella tilted Michael's head back, lifted his chin, and gave 2 rescue breaths, watching his chest rise and fall. She had practiced this sequence hundreds of times on the old CPR dummy at the community center, but never on a real person, never when someone's actual life hung in the balance. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer with each passing second. "Come on, sir," Isabella whispered between compressions. "You have people who love you. Don't leave them yet. Don't leave them like my mama left me." Michael's eyelids fluttered. A small gasp escaped his lips. "He's responding," someone in the crowd shouted. Isabella immediately checked his pulse again, stronger now, more regular. His color was improving, the blue tinge fading from his lips. She had done it. She had actually done it. The paramedics arrived just as Michael's eyes began to open, confused and unfocused, but undeniably alive. The lead paramedic, a burly man named Dave, with 20 years of experience, took one look at the scene and shook his head in amazement. "Who performed CPR?" Dave asked, setting down his equipment. Every finger in the crowd pointed to Isabella, who was now sitting quietly beside Michael, holding his hand and talking to him in soft, reassuring tones. "Little girl," Dave said gently, "you just saved this man's life. Where did you learn to do that?" Isabella looked up at him with those same dark, serious eyes that had captivated Michael moments before. "My mama was Dr. Elena Martinez. She taught me that knowledge is the only thing nobody can ever take away from you." As the paramedics loaded Michael onto a stretcher, he managed to grab Isabella's small hand with surprising strength. "What's your name?" he whispered hoarsely. "Isabella Martinez," she replied. "And don't worry, sir, the hospital will take good care of you now." But as the ambulance doors closed and Michael was whisked away toward Chicago General Hospital, none of them could have imagined that this was only the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. Back on the sidewalk, Isabella picked up her box of candy bars, most of them scattered and forgotten in the chaos. Tomorrow, she would return to this same corner, and people would see her as just another poor kid trying to make a few dollars. They had no idea they had just witnessed the birth of a legend. Chapter 3. The Impossible Child. Doctor. Amanda Foster had been running the emergency department at Chicago General Hospital for 15 years, and she thought she had seen everything. Heart attacks, car accidents, overdoses, gunshot wounds. The full spectrum of human tragedy and resilience. But nothing had prepared her for the report that came in, with the ambulance carrying Michael Richardson. "Dr. Foster!" Paramedic Dave Williams called out as they wheeled Michael through the automatic doors. "You're not going to believe this one. CPR was performed by a 7-year-old kid on the street. Perfect technique, textbook execution." "I've never seen anything like it." Amanda raised an eyebrow, but focused on her patient. Michael Richardson was stable now, conscious and responsive, his color good despite the obvious exhaustion from his cardiac event. The preliminary EKG showed clear signs of a myocardial infarction, but whoever had performed CPR had kept him alive long enough for proper medical intervention. "Mr. Richardson, I'm Dr. Foster. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Michael managed, his voice raspy, "but alive thanks to a little girl. Is she okay? Did someone make sure she got home safely?" "Sir, we need to focus on you right now," Amanda replied, though she made a mental note to follow up on the child later. "You've had a heart attack, and we need to get you to the catheterization lab immediately." As they prepped Michael for emergency cardiac catheterization, Amanda couldn't shake the paramedic's story. A 7-year-old performing CPR? It was medically impossible, or at least highly improbable. Children that age barely had the physical strength to provide effective chest compressions, let alone the knowledge and emotional composure required. 2 hours later, after successfully opening Michael's blocked coronary artery, Amanda found herself reviewing the street camera footage that police had provided. What she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about medicine and child development. The little girl on the screen moved with purpose and precision that defied explanation. Her hand placement was perfect, her compression depth appropriate, her rescue breathing technique flawless. She even managed the crowd, gave clear instructions to bystanders, and maintained perfect timing throughout the entire sequence. "Dr. Foster?" Nurse Patricia Hendricks knocked on her office door. "There's someone here asking about Mr. Richardson. Says she's the girl who helped him." Amanda looked up from the footage, curious. "Send her in." Isabella Martinez walked into Dr. Foster's office, wearing the same simple clothes from earlier. Faded jeans, a worn purple jacket, and shoes that had seen better days. But her posture was confident, her gaze direct and intelligent. "I wanted to make sure he was okay," Isabella said simply. "Mr. Richardson, is he going to be all right?" "And you are?" "Isabella Martinez. I performed CPR on him this morning." The way she said it, matter-of-fact and professional, sent chills down Amanda's spine. "Isabella, where did you learn to perform CPR?" "My mama taught me, Dr. Elena Martinez. She used to work at St. Mary's Hospital before she got sick." Isabella's voice remained steady, but Amanda noticed her hands clench slightly at her sides. The name hit Amanda like a physical blow. Dr. Elena Martinez, she remembered her well, brilliant emergency physician, one of the most dedicated doctors Amanda had ever worked with. Elena had died 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer, a devastating loss to the medical community. "Elena Martinez was your mother?" Isabella nodded. "She taught me everything she could before she died. Said knowledge was the only inheritance she could give me that nobody could steal." Amanda studied the child before her, the serious eyes, the way she held herself, the calm confidence in the face of adult authority. This was Elena's daughter, and suddenly everything started making sense. Isabella, what you did today was extraordinary. You saved that man's life using techniques that most adults don't know. Mama always said that medicine isn't about age or size. It's about knowledge, compassion, and the courage to act when someone needs help. Isabella paused, looking directly at Amanda. Is Mr. Richardson really going to be okay? I need to know I did everything right. You did everything perfectly, Amanda assured her. Better than perfect, actually. You gave him the exact care he needed at the exact moment he needed it. For the first time since entering the office, Isabella's composure cracked slightly. Relief flooded her features, followed quickly by something else, a determination that seemed far too mature for her 7 years. Doctor. Foster, can I ask you something? Of course. How do I become a real doctor, like Mama was? I know I'm just a kid, but I want to help people. I want to save lives. Amanda stared at this remarkable child, Elena's daughter, sitting in her office asking questions that most people didn't consider until college. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. Isabella, I think that's a conversation we need to have very carefully, Amanda said. But first, there's someone I think you should meet. Chapter 4. The Doctor's Daughter. 3 years earlier, Dr. Elena Martinez had been racing through the corridors of St. Mary's Hospital with the same determination her daughter would later show on Michigan Avenue. But that night, Elena was fighting 2 battles, one against time and another against the cancer that was slowly destroying her body from the inside. Dr. Martinez, we have an emergency in Trauma Bay 3, Nurse Johnson had called out. Car accident, multiple casualties, 1 critical. Elena had paused only long enough to swallow another pain pill before rushing to help, despite the fact that her own chemotherapy session was scheduled in just 2 hours. At 34, she was already considered one of the most promising emergency physicians in Chicago, known for her innovative techniques and her refusal to give up on any patient. The critical patient was a woman named Jennifer Richardson, wife of a prominent businessman. She'd been hit by a drunk driver while walking home from a charity event. Internal bleeding, possible traumatic brain injury, multiple fractures. The kind of case that required every ounce of skill and determination Elena possessed. For 8 hours, Elena had fought to save Jennifer's life. She pioneered experimental procedures, consulted with specialists via video conference, and refused to leave the operating room even when her own body was begging for rest. Michael Richardson had paced the waiting room, clinging to hope while Elena battled the impossible. But medicine, Elena knew, was not always about winning. Sometimes it was about fighting with such grace and determination that even in defeat, something beautiful emerged. Jennifer Richardson had died at 3:47 a.m., with Eleanor holding her hand and Michael sobbing in the hallway outside. It was Elena who had delivered the news, Elena who had stayed with Michael as he crumpled under the weight of loss. Elena who had somehow found words of comfort despite her own exhaustion and pain. She fought, Elena had told Michael. She fought so hard, and she knew you loved her. That's not nothing, Mr. Richardson. Love like that, it echoes forward, it changes things. Michael had looked up at Elena through his tears and seen something extraordinary, a doctor who had given everything she had, who had treated his wife not as a case or a statistic, but as a human being worthy of every possible effort. 2 months later, Elena herself had been the patient, lying in a hospital bed at Chicago General while pancreatic cancer ravaged her body. But even then, even as her own strength faded, she had spent her final weeks teaching 4-year-old Isabella everything she could. Mama, why do people get sick? Why do people... Isabella had asked one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on Elena's hospital bed, while her mother drew diagrams of the human heart on a napkin. "Sometimes bodies break down, Mija," Elena had explained gently. "But that's why we need doctors. To fix what's broken, to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Will you teach me to be a doctor like you?" Elena had smiled through her pain. "I'll teach you everything I can, baby girl. But being a doctor isn't just about knowing things. It's about caring so much that you're willing to carry other people's pain to help them heal." Isabella had nodded solemnly, absorbing every word. "Promise me something, Isabella," Elena had whispered during one of their last conversations. "Promise me you'll use what I teach you to help people. Promise me you'll never let anyone tell you that you're too young or too small to make a difference." "I promise, Mama." Elena had died 3 days later, leaving behind a 4-year-old daughter with an extraordinary gift and the determination to use it. What she couldn't have known was that 3 years later, that same daughter would save the life of the man who had watched Elena fight so desperately to save his wife. The universe, it seemed, had a plan all along. Now, as Dr. Foster prepared to introduce Isabella to Michael Richardson, none of them understood they were about to complete a circle that had begun with one act of medical heroism and was about to transform into something much larger. In room 314, Michael Richardson lay recovering from his cardiac catheterization, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the little girl who had saved his life. Somewhere in the back of his mind, something nagged at him, a familiar quality in those dark, determined eyes that he couldn't quite place. Soon he would understand everything. Michael Richardson had been awake for 3 hours, and the questions wouldn't stop coming. Doctors, nurses, administrators, everyone wanted to know about the child who had saved his life. But Michael found himself unable to focus on their inquiries. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those dark, serious eyes staring down at him with an intensity that seemed impossibly familiar. "Mr. Richardson?" Dr. Foster knocked gently on his room door. "There's someone here who wants to check on you. The young lady who helped you this morning." Michael's heart rate monitor immediately picked up pace. "Please, send her in." Isabella Martinez walked into room 314 with the same quiet confidence she had shown on the street. She was even smaller than Michael remembered, barely tall enough to see over his hospital bed, but there was something about her presence that filled the room. "How are you feeling, Mr. Richardson?" Isabella asked, her voice professionally concerned but warm. "Thanks to you, I'm alive," Michael replied, studying her face carefully. There was something so familiar about her features, something that tugged at memories he couldn't quite grasp. "I need to thank you properly. What you did, that took incredible courage." Isabella shrugged, as if saving lives was something she did every Tuesday. "Mama always said courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're scared." "Your mama sounds like a wise woman." She was. Isabella's voice carried a weight of loss that no 7-year-old should have to bear. "Dr. Elena Martinez. She died when I was 4. The words hit Michael like another heart attack. Dr. Elena Martinez. The name crashed through his consciousness, bringing with it a flood of memories that he had tried desperately to bury. St. Mary's Hospital. Jennifer's accident. The doctor who had fought so hard, who had stayed with them through the worst night of his life, who had held Jennifer's hand as she slipped away. Michael stared at Isabella with new understanding, seeing now what he had missed before. The shape of her eyes, the determined set of her jaw, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity. She was Elena Martinez's daughter, the daughter of the woman who had tried to save his wife. "Your mother," Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She tried to save my wife 3 years ago, Jennifer Richardson." Isabella's eyes widened with recognition. "You're him, the man Mama cried about. She said she tried everything, that she was so sorry she couldn't save Mrs. Richardson." "She gave everything she had," Michael said, tears beginning to flow freely. "Your mother was extraordinary. She fought for Jennifer like she was family. She stayed with us, comforted us, never gave up hope, even when the situation was hopeless." The room fell silent except for the quiet beeping of medical equipment. Two souls, connected by tragedy and loss, staring at each other across a hospital bed, understanding finally dawning between them. "Mama used to say that sometimes God puts people in our path for reasons we can't understand," Isabella said softly. "She said that every life we touch touches us back." Michael reached out and took Isabella's small hand in his. "Your mother saved my soul that night, even though she couldn't save Jennifer's life. And today, you saved my life. It's like—" He paused, struggling to find the words. "It's like Elena is still out there, still fighting to save people. Through me," Isabella finished, understanding perfectly. "Through you." Dr. Foster, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, felt tears of her own beginning to fall. In 15 years of emergency medicine, she had never witnessed anything quite like this, a circle of compassion and healing that transcended death itself. "Isabella," Michael said, his voice growing stronger, "I owe your mother a debt I can never repay. She gave everything she had trying to save Jennifer. And now you've given me a second chance at life. You don't owe us anything, Mr. Richardson. That's not why Mama became a doctor, and it's not why I want to be one." Michael looked at this remarkable child, this living legacy of one of the most compassionate people he had ever known, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Isabella, what if I told you that you don't have to wait until you're grown up to be a doctor? What if I told you that there might be a way for you to start helping people right now, today?" Isabella's eyes lit up with a hope so bright it seemed to illuminate the entire room. "What do you mean?" Michael squeezed her hand gently. "I mean, Isabella Martinez, that your real education is about to begin." Dr. Foster had seen many remarkable things in her career, but watching Michael Richardson and Isabella Martinez discover their connection had left her speechless. Now, as Michael spoke about Isabella's real education beginning, she found herself leaning forward, captivated by what was unfolding before her eyes. "Mr. Richardson," Dr. Foster interjected gently, "what exactly are you proposing?" Michael looked between Isabella and the doctor, his mind racing with possibilities that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. "Dr. Foster, what if I told you that I've been looking for a way to honor my wife's memory for 3 years, and I think I just found it?" Isabella watched him carefully, her young mind processing the adult conversation with remarkable clarity. "You want to help me become a doctor?" "I want to help you become the doctor your mother dreamed you would be," Michael replied. "But more than that, I want to make sure that other children like you, children with extraordinary gifts and circumstances, get the chances they deserve." Michael's voice grew stronger as the idea took shape. "Dr. Foster, what would it take to create a special program here at Chicago General? A youth medical training initiative that could identify gifted children and provide them with real medical education?" Dr. Foster's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Richardson, that's an incredibly complex undertaking. There are legal issues, educational requirements, safety protocols, all of which can be solved with proper planning and adequate funding," Michael interrupted. "I'm talking about creating something revolutionary. A program that doesn't just wait for children to grow up before nurturing their gifts." Isabella's heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. "You mean I could really learn? Like actually learn medicine? Not just from old textbooks, but from real doctors? With proper supervision and age-appropriate modifications, yes," Michael said, turning to Dr. Foster. "Doctor, you saw what Isabella did today. That wasn't luck or coincidence. That was training, knowledge, and natural ability. How many other children might be out there with similar potential, lacking only opportunity? Dr. Foster found herself caught up in Michael's vision, despite her professional caution. It would require board approval, special insurance, modified curricula. "And I can provide the funding for all of it," Michael said firmly. "I can endow the program, hire the best educators, create scholarships for children who show aptitude. We could call it the Elena Martinez Youth Medical Education Program." Isabella gasped, her eyes filling with tears. "You'd name it after Mama?" "Your mother dedicated her life to healing people," Michael replied. "This program would be her legacy, continued through you and other children like you." Dr. Foster's mind was spinning with the possibilities. If we could design it properly, with safety as the top priority, it could revolutionize how we think about medical education. Children learn languages most easily when they're young. Why not medical concepts as well? "Exactly," Michael said, his business acumen taking over. "We could start with basic anatomy, physiology, first aid certification. As the children mature, we could expand the curriculum. By the time they're ready for medical school, they'd be years ahead of their peers." Isabella was practically vibrating with excitement. "And I could help other people? Really help them?" "You already are helping people," Dr. Foster said softly. "What you did today proves that. But yes, with proper training, you could help many more." Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "Dr. Foster, I'm going to make some calls. By the end of the week, I want to have a preliminary proposal for the hospital board. Isabella, I want you to think about what kind of doctors you'd like to learn from." "All kinds," Isabella replied immediately. "Emergency medicine like Mama, but also pediatrics, surgery, cardiology." She paused, looking directly at Michael. "Especially cardiology. I want to learn how to fix hearts." The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. Isabella wanted to fix hearts, literally and figuratively. "There's one more thing," Michael said, his voice becoming serious. "Isabella, this program would be demanding. It would require dedication, study, hard work. Are you prepared for that?" Isabella straightened her shoulders, and for a moment she looked exactly like her mother had during those desperate hours trying to save Jennifer. "Mr. Richardson, I've been preparing for this my whole life. Mama always said that our gifts aren't really ours. They belong to the people we're meant to help." Michael felt his own heart, newly repaired and beating steadily, fill with emotion. "Then let's begin." As the three of them sat in that hospital room, none of them could have imagined that they were launching something that would eventually become one of the most innovative medical education programs in the country. They couldn't foresee the hundreds of gifted children who would benefit, the lives that would be saved, the barriers that would be broken. All they knew was that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest decision to say yes to possibility. "Dr. Foster," Michael said, extending his hand, "would you be willing to be the director of this program?" Amanda Foster looked at Michael Richardson, then at Isabella Martinez, Elena's brilliant daughter, sitting there with hope shining in her eyes like a beacon. "Mr. Richardson," she said, shaking his hand firmly, "I think that's the best idea I've heard in 15 years. But none of them knew that their conversation was being overheard, and that within hours their remarkable story would begin spreading far beyond the walls of Chicago General Hospital. 2 weeks after Michael's heart attack, the conference room at Chicago General Hospital buzzed with tension. The emergency board meeting had been called to discuss what some members were already calling the Richardson Proposal, a radical youth medical education program that challenged every conventional approach to medical training. "With all due respect, Mr. Richardson," Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, the hospital's chief administrator, said from across the mahogany table, "What you're proposing is unprecedented. We're talking about allowing children, some as young as 7, into medical training environments. The liability alone could bankrupt us. Michael adjusted his tie, the same nervous gesture he'd made before that fateful walk down Michigan Avenue. But this time, he wasn't alone. Dr. Foster sat beside him, armed with research and preliminary curricula, while Isabella waited in the hallway with Michael's assistant Sarah, practicing anatomy flashcards. "Dr. Hawthorne," Michael replied calmly, "3 weeks ago, a 7-year-old child saved my life using medical techniques that most adults don't possess. That same child is the daughter of one of the most dedicated physicians this hospital has ever employed. We're not talking about putting children in dangerous situations. We're talking about nurturing extraordinary gifts under careful supervision." Board member Dr. James Kellerman, a surgeon with 30 years of experience, leaned forward skeptically. "Mr. Richardson, I understand your gratitude, but medicine requires maturity, judgment, emotional stability. Children simply don't possess these qualities." "Then how do you explain what Isabella Martinez accomplished?" Dr. Foster interjected, sliding a tablet across the table. "I've analyzed the street camera footage with 3 independent experts. Her CPR technique was flawless. Her timing was perfect. Her decision-making under pressure exceeded that of many first-year medical residents." The board members passed the tablet around, watching Isabella's performance in stunned silence. Even Dr. Kellerman's expression began to shift from skepticism to fascination. "Furthermore," Dr. Foster continued, "I've researched similar programs internationally. The Young Physicians Initiative in Sweden has been training gifted children for 15 years with remarkable success. Their graduates consistently outperform traditionally educated medical students." Michael sensed the room's energy shifting. "I'm prepared to fund this program completely, $20 million initially, with additional funding as needed. We're talking about scholarships, specialized facilities, insurance coverage, legal protection. The hospital's only investment would be expertise and space." Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the head of pediatrics, spoke for the first time. "What kind of age limits are we discussing?" "Children who demonstrate exceptional aptitude between ages 7 and 16, Dr. Foster replied. "The program would be rigorous screening process, psychological evaluation, academic testing, demonstrated interest in medicine. We're not talking about every child who wants to play doctor." "And what happens when these children grow up?" Dr. Hawthorne asked. "Do they automatically get admitted to medical school?" "They earn their way in, just like everyone else," Michael said firmly. "But they'll enter with advantages that traditional students can't match. Years of hands-on experience, deep understanding of medical concepts, and most importantly, absolute certainty that medicine is their calling." Board member Dr. Rachel Kim raised her hand. "I'd like to hear from the child herself. If we're going to base a program on her abilities, shouldn't we evaluate her directly?" Michael smiled. This was the moment he'd been hoping for. "Isabella, would you come in, please?" Isabella Martinez entered the boardroom with the same quiet confidence she'd shown in every situation. She wore a simple blue dress that Michael had bought for her, and her dark hair was neatly braided, but it was her eyes, those serious, intelligent eyes, that immediately commanded the room's attention. "Hello, everyone," Isabella said politely. "I'm Isabella Martinez, and I want to be a doctor like my mama." "Doctor?" Kellerman leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "Isabella, tell us why you want to study medicine." "Because people get hurt and sick, and somebody needs to help them," Isabella replied without hesitation. "My mama always said that being a doctor isn't a job. It's a responsibility to carry other people's pain until you can help them heal." "Dear, what makes you think you're ready for such responsibility at your age?" Dr. Santos asked. Isabella thought carefully before answering. I don't think I'm ready for all of it yet. That's why I need to learn. But I know I'm ready to start learning because I already understand the most important part, which is that every person's life has value, and if you have the knowledge to help someone, you have the duty to use it. Isabella's voice grew stronger. When I saw Mr. Richardson on the ground, I could have walked away like other people were doing. But Mama taught me that knowledge without action is just selfishness. The room fell silent. Doctor, Hawthorne stared at this 7-year-old child who had just articulated the fundamental principle of medical ethics with more clarity than some medical students managed after 4 years of study. Isabella, Dr. Foster said gently, if we created this program, would you be willing to work very hard to study subjects that other children your age don't learn? Dr. Foster, I already study anatomy and physiology every day at the library. I already practice CPR techniques and first aid. The only difference would be that I'd finally have real teachers instead of just books and videos. Doctor. Kellerman removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture the other board members recognized as his way of processing difficult decisions. Isabella, would you mind stepping outside for a moment while we discuss this? Of course. Isabella turned to leave, then paused at the door. Just, whatever you decide, please remember that there might be other kids like me out there. Kids who want to help people, but don't know how to start. This program isn't really about me. It's about giving them a chance too. As the door closed behind her, the board members sat in contemplative silence. Finally, Dr. Kellerman spoke. 20 years ago, I would have said this was impossible. 10 years ago, I would have called it irresponsible. He looked around the table. Today, I'm going to say it's necessary. One by one, the board members began to nod in agreement. The Elena Martinez Youth Medical Education Program was about to become reality. 6 months later, Isabella Martinez stood outside the newly constructed Young Physicians Center at Chicago General Hospital, clutching a backpack filled with medical textbooks that most college students would find challenging. The building itself was a marvel, designed specifically for the program, with scaled-down anatomy labs, simulation rooms equipped with pediatric-sized equipment, and classrooms that could accommodate both children and adult instructors. Ready for your first day, Dr. Martinez? Michael Richardson asked, using the honorary title that had become Isabella's nickname around the hospital. Over the past months, as the program developed, Michael had become something between a mentor and a surrogate father to Isabella, while she had become the daughter he and Jennifer had always dreamed of having. "I've been ready for this my whole life," Isabella replied, but Michael could hear the nervous excitement in her voice. Today marked the official launch of the program, with Isabella and 11 other carefully selected children beginning their extraordinary medical education. Dr. Foster emerged from the building, clipboard in hand, and barely contained excitement on her face. "Good morning, everyone. Today, you become the first class of the Elena Martinez Youth Medical Education Program. You're about to make history." The group of young students ranged in age from 7 to 15. There was Marcus Williams, a 12-year-old from Detroit who had performed emergency first aid after a shooting in his neighborhood. 10-year-old Sarah Chen had taught herself advanced chemistry after watching her diabetic grandmother struggle with insulin management. 15-year-old James Thompson had been volunteering at a free clinic since he was 12, learning Spanish to better communicate with patients. Each child had a story, a driving passion for medicine that transcended their years. "Before we begin," Dr. Foster announced, "I want you to understand something important. This program exists because we believe that extraordinary gifts deserve extraordinary opportunities. But with opportunity comes responsibility. You're not just students, you're pioneers." Isabella felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with pride. Around her, the other children seemed equally awed by the magnitude of what they were undertaking. Their first instructor was Dr. Michael Chen, a renowned anatomy professor who had volunteered to adapt his medical school curriculum for their unique needs. "Welcome to Introduction to Human Anatomy," he began, leading them into a specially designed lab. "Today, we're going to start with the cardiovascular system, specifically understanding what happens during a myocardial infarction." Isabella's hand shot up immediately. "Like what happened to Mr. Richardson." "Exactly like what happened to Mr. Richardson," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Isabella, would you mind sharing with the class what you observed during his heart attack?" For the next hour, Isabella found herself at the center of a discussion that moved seamlessly between her real-world experience and advanced medical theory. The other children asked questions that demonstrated not just curiosity, but genuine understanding of complex concepts. "The beautiful thing about young minds," Dr. Chen explained to Dr. Foster afterward, "is that they don't know what's supposed to be too difficult for them. They approach medical concepts with the same openness they bring to learning languages or mathematics." By lunchtime, the children had covered material that typically took first-year medical students weeks to master. But more importantly, they had begun to form bonds with each other and with their instructors that went beyond traditional teacher-student relationships. "How does it feel to be here?" Sarah Chen asked Isabella as they ate lunch in the program's dedicated cafeteria. "Like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be," Isabella replied honestly. "Like Mama's dream is coming true." That afternoon brought their first simulation exercise, a controlled emergency scenario where they would work as a team to stabilize a patient, an advanced medical mannequin, experiencing cardiac arrest. Dr. Foster watched nervously as the children approached the simulation with the same seriousness they would bring to a real emergency. Isabella naturally took charge, her experience on Michigan Avenue giving her confidence the others lacked. "Marcus, you check airway and breathing. Sarah, monitor pulse and blood pressure. James, prepare the defibrillator simulator. Isabella," Dr. Foster called out, "remember to explain your reasoning as you work." "Right," Isabella nodded, never taking her eyes off the mannequin. "First priority in cardiac arrest is immediate CPR to maintain blood flow to vital organs. We need to assess rhythm before defibrillation, because not all cardiac arrest patterns respond to electrical shock." As the simulation progressed, Dr. Foster found herself amazed by the children's intuitive teamwork and Isabella's natural leadership abilities. These weren't just smart kids playing doctor. They were developing real medical instincts under carefully controlled conditions. "Excellent work, everyone," Dr. Foster announced as the simulation ended. "You just demonstrated skills that many nursing students struggle with." After the other children left for the day, Isabella lingered in the anatomy lab, studying models of the human heart with an intensity that reminded Dr. Foster of Elena Martinez. "Isabella, how are you feeling about the program?" Dr. Foster asked. "It's everything I hoped it would be," Isabella replied. "But Dr. Foster, I keep thinking about what I said to the board, about other kids who might be out there. When will we find them?" Dr. Foster smiled. "Actually, Isabella, that's your next challenge. We want you and the other program participants to help us identify other gifted children. You'll be our ambassadors, visiting schools and community centers, sharing your story and looking for others who share your passion." Isabella's eyes lit up with excitement. "You mean we get to help build the program?" "We mean you get to help change the world," Dr. Foster replied, "one young doctor at a time." As Isabella finally headed home that evening, she carried with her not just the satisfaction of an extraordinary first day, but the growing understanding that she was part of something much larger than herself, a movement that would transform how society thought about age, ability, and the nature of medical calling. The program was no longer just Michael Richardson's tribute to Elena Martinez. It was becoming Isabella's legacy to future generations of young healers. 3 months into the program, Isabella Martinez found herself sitting in a television studio in downtown Chicago, facing the intense lights and cameras of Chicago Morning Live. The producer had promised this would be a friendly interview, but Isabella could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her small shoulders. And we're back in 5, 4, 3. The floor director counted down silently, and anchor Janet Peterson's professional smile returned. We're here with Isabella Martinez, the remarkable 7-year-old who not only saved a man's life through CPR, but has since become the youngest student in a revolutionary medical education program. Isabella, tell us how it feels to be studying medicine at such a young age. Isabella had practiced this answer with Dr. Foster, but speaking to millions of viewers felt different than rehearsing in an empty room. It feels like what I'm supposed to be doing, Ms. Peterson. My mama always said that gifts are meant to be shared, not hidden. Your mother, Dr. Elena Martinez, was herself a physician who died when you were very young. Do you feel pressure to follow in her footsteps? I don't feel pressure, Isabella replied thoughtfully. I feel purpose, like Mama planted seeds in me, and now they're finally growing. The interview continued for 8 minutes, with Isabella answering questions about the program, her studies, and her dreams with a poise that amazed viewers across the country. But what happened afterward would prove far more significant than the interview itself. Within hours of the broadcast, Chicago General Hospital's phones were ringing constantly. Parents from across the nation called asking about the program. Medical professionals wanted to volunteer. Education experts requested information about the curriculum, but not all the attention was positive. Dr. Foster, we have a problem, Michael Richardson said, bursting into her office the following Monday morning with a stack of newspapers and printouts. Look at these headlines. Dr. Foster read them with growing concern. Child exploitation disguised as education, from the Chicago Tribune. Are we pushing kids too hard, from USA Today? The dangers of medical training for minors, from the Journal of Medical Ethics. It gets worse, Michael continued. The Illinois Department of Education is launching an investigation into our curriculum. They're questioning whether we're in violation of child labor laws, and there's a group called Protecting Childhood organizing protests. Isabella, who had been quietly working on anatomy homework in the corner of Dr. Foster's office, looked up with concern. Are they going to shut down the program? Not if I have anything to say about it, Dr. Foster replied firmly. But Isabella, you need to understand something. When you change the world pushes back. There will always be people who think children should stay in their assigned boxes. The criticism intensified when Dr. Harold Beckman, a prominent child psychologist, published an op-ed titled The Isabella Martinez Phenomenon, Robbing Children of Their Childhood. In it, he argued that the program placed unrealistic pressure on young minds and could cause long-term psychological damage. These children are being asked to confront mortality, suffering and life or death decisions at an age when they should be playing with toys and learning basic arithmetic, Dr. Beckman wrote. No matter how gifted they may appear, they lack the emotional development necessary to handle such weighty responsibilities. The criticism stung, but it also galvanized support from unexpected sources. Dr. Maria Santos, a renowned child development expert from Harvard, published a counter-argument defending the program. History is filled with examples of extraordinary young people who achieved remarkable things when given appropriate opportunities, Dr. Santos wrote. Mozart composed symphonies at age 8. Mary Anning discovered important fossils as a child. We must distinguish between exploitation and nurturing genuine gifts. More importantly, support came from the medical community itself. Prominent physicians began sharing stories of young people who had shown early medical aptitude but had been discouraged from pursuing their interests until much later in life. Dr. A. Benjamin Wright, chief of surgery at Johns Hopkins, wrote a particularly powerful letter to the Chicago Tribune. I have observed Isabella Martinez in action during a visit to Chicago General. What I saw was not a child being pushed beyond her limits, but a young person finally receiving the education her extraordinary gifts demanded. To deny such opportunities in the name of protecting childhood is to waste some of humanity's greatest potential. The controversy reached its peak when the State Education Board scheduled formal hearings to determine whether the program met legal and ethical standards. Isabella and the other program participants would be required to testify about their experiences. "Are you nervous about the hearing?" Dr. Foster asked Isabella the night before. "A little," Isabella admitted. "But Mama used to say that truth has its own power. If we're really helping kids like me, then the truth will speak for itself. And if the board decides to shut us down?" Isabella was quiet for a long moment. "Then we'll find another way. Mr. Richardson taught me that when you're doing something important, obstacles aren't reasons to stop. They're puzzles to solve." The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Isabella Martinez, at 7 years old, was about to defend not just her own education, but the fundamental principle that extraordinary children deserve extraordinary opportunities. As she prepared for what could be the most important testimony of her young life, Isabella thought about her mother's words. Knowledge without action is just selfishness. Tomorrow, she would have to prove that the action they were taking was not just beneficial for her, but essential for other gifted children who deserved the same chance to make a difference. The future of the Elena Martinez Youth Medical Education Program, and perhaps the broader question of how society nurtures exceptional young minds, would rest on the words of a 7-year-old girl who had already saved one life and was determined to save many more. The Illinois State Education Board hearing room was packed beyond capacity on Tuesday morning, with overflow crowds watching on closed-circuit television in adjoining rooms. Media representatives filled the front rows, while medical professionals, educators, and parents crowded every available seat. At the center of it all sat Isabella Martinez, looking impossibly small at the witness table, yet radiating a calm confidence that seemed to fill the entire space. "Ms. Martinez," began Board Chairman Dr. Robert Fitzgerald, "you understand that today's hearing will determine whether the program you're participating in can continue to operate, correct?" "Yes, sir," Isabella replied clearly. "And I understand that some people think children like me shouldn't be learning advanced medicine. Today, we want to hear your perspective on that question. In your own words, tell us about your experience in the program." Isabella had prepared for this moment for weeks, but as she looked out at the sea of faces, some supportive, others skeptical, she felt the weight of representing not just herself, but every gifted child who had ever been told they were too young to pursue their dreams. "When my mama was dying," Isabella began, her voice steady despite the emotion of the memory, "she taught me everything she could about medicine, not because she wanted to make me grow up too fast, but because she could see that helping people was what I was meant to do." The room was absolutely silent, every person hanging on her words. "For 3 years after Mama died, I kept studying on my own, reading her medical books, watching videos, practicing on dolls. But nobody believed that a little kid could really understand medicine. When Mr. Richardson had his heart attack, I finally got to use what I'd learned. I saved his life not because I was trying to be grown up, but because I was finally being myself." Board member Dr. Patricia Williams leaned forward. Isabella, some experts worry that studying medicine at your age might be harmful to your emotional development. How do you respond to that concern? Isabella considered the question seriously. Dr. Williams, I think what's harmful is when children have gifts and aren't allowed to use them. Every day in the program, I learn about how bodies work and how to help people feel better. That doesn't make me sad or scared. It makes me excited about the future. But what about normal childhood activities? Pressed Dr. Williams. Don't you miss playing games, watching cartoons, just being a regular kid? I do play games, Isabella replied with a slight smile. I play anatomy games, medical trivia, simulation scenarios. I watch videos, medical procedure videos and educational documentaries. The difference is that my version of fun happens to be learning how to save lives. Dr. Harold Beckman, the psychologist who had written critically about the program, spoke from the audience. Isabella, don't you think children your age should be protected from exposure to suffering and death? Isabella's expression grew more serious. Dr. Beckman, I was 4 years old when I watched my mama die from cancer. I learned about suffering and death whether I was in a medical program or not. The difference is that now I'm learning how to fight against those things instead of just feeling helpless. The response sent murmurs through the crowd. Even Dr. Beckman seemed taken aback by the directness of Isabella's answer. Let me ask you something different, said Board Vice Chairman Dr. Jennifer Lee. If this program didn't exist, what would you be doing instead? I'd still be studying medicine on my own, just like I was before, Isabella replied immediately. I'd still be reading medical textbooks at the library, still practicing CPR techniques, still dreaming about becoming a doctor, like Mama. The only difference is that now I have real teachers helping me learn correctly and friends who understand why medicine matters to me. At that moment, the hearing room doors burst open. A hospital security guard rushed in, followed by Dr. Foster, both looking panicked. Dr. Fitzgerald, Dr. Foster called out urgently. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have an emergency situation. There's been a multi-car accident just outside the building, multiple casualties, and our ambulances are delayed due to traffic. The room erupted in confusion as people turned to look outside. Through the large windows, they could see the aftermath of what appeared to be a serious collision involving at least 3 vehicles. The nearest hospital is 15 minutes away, Dr. Foster continued breathlessly. We have injured people who need immediate medical attention. Without hesitation, Isabella stood up from the witness table. Dr. Foster, I can help. Isabella, no, Dr. Fitzgerald protested. This is exactly what we're concerned about, exposing children to traumatic situations. But Isabella was already moving toward the door, her medical training taking over completely. People are hurt. That's more important than a hearing. Several of the medical professionals in the audience immediately followed her, including Dr. Beckman, who later said he acted purely on instinct. What happened next would be recorded by dozens of cell phone cameras and news crews who had been covering the hearing. Outside the building, Isabella Martinez, still wearing the formal dress she had chosen for her testimony, immediately began triaging the accident victims with a competence that left seasoned professionals stunned. This man has a probable concussion and possible internal bleeding, she announced, kneeling beside the driver of the first car. He needs immediate transport. This woman has a broken arm and lacerations but stable vitals. Second priority. As she moved from victim to victim, providing first aid and directing the emergency response, Isabella demonstrated not just medical knowledge, but the kind of calm leadership under pressure that most people never develop. Doctor. Beckman found himself holding an IV bag while Isabella inserted the line into a young man's arm with steady hands. How did you learn to do that? He asked, his earlier criticism forgotten. Dr. Chen taught us IV insertion last month. Isabella replied matter-of-factly, never taking her attention away from her patient. But mostly, I watched Mama do it hundreds of times. By the time the ambulances arrived, Isabella and the other medical professionals had stabilized all the victims and potentially saved at least 2 lives. As the last ambulance pulled away, the crowd that had gathered outside began to applaud. Dr. Fitzgerald, who had witnessed the entire scene, approached Isabella with an expression of complete amazement. "Young lady, I think you just answered every question we could possibly have about your program." Isabella looked up at him, her dress dirty and her hair disheveled, but her eyes shining with the satisfaction of having helped people in need. "Does this mean the program can continue?" "Isabella," Dr. Fitzgerald replied, "I think this means your program is about to expand nationwide." As the crowd began to disperse and the hearing room prepared to reconvene, Isabella Martinez had once again proven that extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary people, regardless of their age. The formal vote was unanimous. The Elena Martinez Youth Medical Education Program would not only continue, but would receive full state endorsement and support. 6 months after the hearing that nearly shut down the program, Isabella Martinez stood before a crowd of 500 people at the inaugural National Young Medical Professionals Conference. The event, held at Chicago's McCormick Place, brought together gifted children from across the country who had been selected for newly established youth medical programs in 12 states. 2 years ago, Isabella began, her voice now confident and clear through the auditorium's sound system, I was just a kid selling candy on the streets of Chicago. I had dreams of becoming a doctor like my mama, but nobody believed that someone my age could really understand medicine. In the audience, Michael Richardson watched with pride as the young girl who had saved his life now inspired hundreds of other children to pursue their medical dreams. Beside him sat Dr. Foster, who had been promoted to National Director of Youth Medical Education Programs, overseeing the expansion that Isabella's testimony had made possible. "Today I want to tell you that your age doesn't limit your ability to help people," Isabella continued. "Your knowledge does, your compassion does, your willingness to act when others need help does, but your age is just a number that some people use to try to keep you from reaching your potential." The children in the audience, ranging from 7-year-old David Kim from Los Angeles, who had taught himself surgical suturing techniques, to 15-year-old Rachel Morrison from Atlanta, who had developed a new protocol for treating pediatric asthma, listened with the rapt attention of those who had finally found their tribe. "In our program, we've learned that being young doctors in training means we get to see medicine differently," Isabella continued. "We ask questions that adults have stopped asking. We find solutions that adults have stopped looking for. We care in ways that adults sometimes forget how to care." Over the past year, the success stories had multiplied exponentially. Marcus Williams, the 12-year-old from Detroit, had assisted in developing a new community emergency response protocol that had been adopted by urban hospitals nationwide. Sarah Chen had created simplified diabetic management tools that were now being used in nursing homes across the Midwest. "But the most important thing we've learned," Isabella said, building to her conclusion, "is that medicine isn't really about what we know. It's about how we use what we know to serve others." The applause was thunderous, but Isabella wasn't finished. "I want to end with a challenge," she said, raising her voice above the crowd. "Every one of us in this room has been given extraordinary gifts. The question isn't whether we deserve these gifts or whether we're too young to use them. The question is, what are we going to do with them?" As the conference continued over the next 3 days, Isabella found herself surrounded by children whose stories echoed her own. Young people who had been dismissed, discouraged, or ignored until they found programs that recognized their potential. On the final evening, during a private dinner for program leaders and major donors, Michael Richardson stood to address the group. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I was successful in business, but I had lost my wife, lost my purpose, lost my will to keep going. Then a little girl named Isabella Martinez knelt down on a cold sidewalk and saved my life. He looked directly at Isabella, who was seated at the head table with other program graduates who had been selected for early admission to prestigious pre-med programs. But saving my life was just the beginning. Isabella, you've helped us create something that I believe will change the face of medicine forever. You've shown us that extraordinary children can do extraordinary things when we give them extraordinary opportunities. Michael paused, reaching into his jacket pocket. Which brings me to an announcement that I've been waiting to make for several months. The room fell silent with anticipation. The Elena Martinez Foundation is committing $100 million to establish youth medical education programs in all 50 states within the next 5 years. We're going to make sure that no child with Isabella's gifts ever again has to study alone from library books. The room erupted in applause, but Michael held up his hand for silence. There's one more thing. Isabella, would you come up here for a moment? Isabella approached the podium, curious and slightly nervous about what Michael might say next. Isabella Martinez, Michael said formally. By order of the Elena Martinez Foundation Board of Directors, you are hereby appointed as the youngest ever youth ambassador for medical education. Your job will be to travel the country, identifying gifted children, inspiring young people to pursue medicine, and ensuring that every child with medical calling gets the chance to answer it. Isabella stared at Michael in shock. You mean I get to help find other kids like me? You get to help build an army of young healers, Michael replied. Just like your mother would have wanted. As Isabella accepted the appointment, surrounded by applause from hundreds of medical professionals and educators who had witnessed her journey from street vendor to national leader, she thought about Elena Martinez and the legacy that was growing far beyond anything her mother could have imagined. The little girl who had once been ignored and dismissed for claiming to be a doctor was now in a position to ensure that no other gifted child would face the same barriers. But Isabella's greatest challenge and her greatest triumph was still to come. The foundation's expansion would soon attract international attention, leading to an invitation that would test everything she had learned about medicine, leadership, and the power of believing in impossible dreams. The world was about to discover that Isabella Martinez was just getting started. 5 years after that life-changing morning on Michigan Avenue, 12-year-old Isabella Martinez stood in the emergency room of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, facing the most important moment of her young career. The call had come at 3 a.m. A massive earthquake had struck Haiti, and a medical emergency team was being assembled. They needed someone who could communicate with frightened children in Spanish, someone who understood pediatric trauma protocols, someone who could work efficiently in chaotic conditions. They needed Isabella Martinez. Isabella, are you absolutely certain about this? Dr. Foster asked over the satellite phone connection from Chicago. This isn't a simulation or a controlled environment. This is a real disaster zone with real dangers. Dr. Foster, Mama always said that the moment you become a doctor isn't when you get your diploma. It's when you first choose to carry someone else's pain, Isabella replied, checking her medical kit one final time. I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. Michael Richardson, now serving as chairman of the Global Youth Medical Initiative, watched Isabella with a mixture of pride and concern. Over the years, she had become the daughter he never had, while he had become the father figure she desperately needed. Their bond, forged in tragedy and strengthened through purpose, had created something beautiful, a family built on shared mission rather than shared blood. The conditions will be difficult, warned Dr. Maria Santos, the team leader who had specifically requested Isabella for the mission. Limited supplies, language barriers, traumatized children who may not trust adults in medical uniforms. "That's exactly why you need me," Isabella said with quiet confidence. "Children trust other children, and sometimes the best medicine is simply showing someone that they're not alone." 6 hours later, Isabella found herself in a makeshift medical tent in Port-au-Prince, surrounded by chaos that would have overwhelmed most adults. Buildings had collapsed, families were separated, and injured children were arriving in a steady stream. But as Isabella began moving through the tent, something remarkable happened. "Hola, mi nombre es Isabella," she said gently to a terrified 6-year-old boy with a broken arm. "Soy médica, pero también soy niña como tú. No tengas miedo." The little boy's eyes widened with surprise and relief. Here was someone who looked like his sister, spoke his language, and somehow understood exactly how scared he was. "¿Eres realmente médica?" the boy whispered. "Sí, soy médica," Isabella replied, carefully examining his arm. "Y voy a cuidarte hasta que estés bien." Word spread quickly through the refugee camp that there was a young doctor who could speak to the children in their own language, not just Spanish, but the universal language of childhood itself. Soon, Isabella had a line of young patients who had refused treatment from adult medical workers but willingly accepted care from someone who was like them. Dr. Santos watched in amazement as Isabella worked. "She's not just treating their injuries," she observed to her colleague. "She's healing their fear." "Dr. Isabella," called out Carmen, a 9-year-old girl with severe dehydration. "Mi mamá está perdida. ¿La vas a encontrar?" Isabella knelt beside Carmen's stretcher, taking her small hand. "Carmen, there are many people looking for lost families. But right now, my job is to make sure you're strong and healthy for when your mama finds you." "Can you help me do that?" Carmen nodded solemnly, finally accepting the IV fluids that adult medical workers had been trying to administer for hours. As the day progressed, Isabella found herself at the center of an impromptu pediatric emergency unit, coordinating care for dozens of children while teaching local volunteers basic medical techniques. Her fluency in Spanish, combined with her medical knowledge and natural ability to connect with frightened children, made her invaluable to the relief effort. "Isabella," Dr. Santos called out during a brief lull, "we've just received word that CNN International wants to interview you about the work you're doing here. The whole world is watching this relief effort." "Right now?" Isabella asked, looking around at the children who still needed care. "Right now. This could help the entire youth medical program gain international recognition." Isabella hesitated, then looked at the faces around her, children who had lost everything but had found comfort in the care of someone who understood their world. "Dr. Santos, tell CNN that if they want to interview me, they can do it here while I work. But I'm not leaving these kids for a photo opportunity." The interview that followed, broadcast live to millions of viewers worldwide, would become one of the most powerful pieces of television journalism ever recorded. Viewers watched as Isabella Martinez, fluent in both medical terminology and childhood trauma, explained complex emergency procedures while simultaneously comforting a crying toddler and teaching a local volunteer how to properly clean wounds. "Isabella," the CNN reporter asked, "you're only 12 years old. How do you handle the emotional weight of seeing so much suffering?" Isabella looked directly into the camera, holding the hand of a young boy who had been injured in the earthquake. "My mama taught me that being a doctor means carrying other people's pain until you can help them heal. These children aren't just patients to me. They're my brothers and sisters. When you love someone, taking care of them isn't a burden. It's a privilege." Back in Chicago, Michael Richardson watched the broadcast with tears streaming down his face. Dr. Foster sat beside him, equally moved by what they were witnessing. Amanda, Michael whispered, look what we created. Look what Elena's daughter has become. Not just Elena's daughter, Dr. Foster replied softly. She's all of our daughter now, and she's showing the world what's possible when we believe in young people instead of limiting them. The interview sparked an international movement. Within weeks, applications for youth medical programs poured in from 43 countries. Isabella had become not just a symbol of young achievement, but proof that medicine's future lay in nurturing gifts wherever they appeared, regardless of age or circumstance. 6 months later, Isabella returned to Chicago as the youngest person ever to address the World Health Organization. Standing before delegates from 194 countries, she spoke with the authority of someone who had proven herself in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. 5 years ago, I was a little girl, selling candy on the street, dreaming of becoming a doctor like my mama, Isabella began. Today, I stand before you not as an exception, but as an example of what's possible when we stop limiting children and start empowering them. She paused, looking out at the assembly of world leaders and medical professionals. My mama, Dr. Elena Martinez, died believing that knowledge and compassion could change the world. She was right. But she couldn't have imagined that her dream would grow into a global movement that has now trained over 5,000 young medical professionals in 67 countries. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. As Isabella concluded her address, she thought about that cold December morning when she had knelt beside Michael Richardson on a Chicago sidewalk. She thought about her mother's hands teaching her to check a pulse, about Michael's determination to honor Elena's memory, about Dr. Foster's willingness to believe in impossible dreams. The future of medicine isn't just being written by those of us in this room, Isabella said in closing. It's being written by every gifted child who dreams of healing others. Our job isn't to protect them from that dream. It's to give them the tools to make it reality. That evening, at a private dinner celebrating the global expansion of youth medical programs, Isabella found herself alone with Michael for a few moments. Mama would be proud, wouldn't she? Isabella asked quietly. Michael pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. Isabella, your mama started something beautiful when she saved lives in her emergency room, but you've turned it into something extraordinary. You've proven that healing doesn't have an age limit, that compassion doesn't require a diploma, and that sometimes the smallest hands can carry the biggest dreams. As Isabella looked around the room filled with young doctors in training from around the world, she understood finally that this was never really about her. It was about every child who had ever been told they were too young to make a difference, every dream that had been dismissed as impossible, every gift that had been overlooked because it came in an unexpected package. The little girl, who had once cried over her mother's medical textbooks, had become the young woman who would ensure that no other child with healing hands would ever have to learn alone. Dr. Isabella Martinez, no longer honorary, but earning her place one saved life at a time, had turned her mother's legacy into humanity's future. And the best part? She was just getting started.